Hello students, this is Professor Arsenault, JMS 200. I'm recording this video on January 6, 2024. This is the video lecture, Current Stuff for the Movie Industry. I'm recording this on January 6, 2024, I already said that. So depending upon when you're watching this is how current this video might be, but at the very least, it's more current than the last video lecture. Okay, before I start going over some stuff, I do need to explain what happened last year. There was two big strikes. There were the writers' strike and the actors had a strike. This kind of shut down Hollywood production for several months. And one of the key issues here is, I'm going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this. One of the key issues that both the writers and the actors were upset with were the way streaming services would pay and have paid their talent. There used to be something called residuals. If you made a television show that aired on broadcast television, when it went into syndication, I'll explain that when we talk about television, but when it went into reruns, or say your show was sold overseas, for example, you would still get paid. Maybe not as much as you got paid the first time, but the second time a show aired, you get some payment, and then even the third, fourth, fifth time. Well, the streaming services like Netflix would do away with that. They have historically paid one lump sum to the actors and the talent, and you get one payment. You're not going to get any compensation later, so just accept this big payment up front and be done with it. There was also something that was very big historically called a back-end deal. A big actor, let's say Denzel Washington, for example, instead of accepting $20 million for a movie or $30 million, actors get paid these ridiculous fees. Denzel Washington or Tom Cruise might say, hey, I'll do the film for 1 million, only a million, a measly 1 million, but I want 1% or even 0.5% of the box office gross. So if Mission Impossible does very well, then Tom Cruise is going to make a lot of money, even though, he foregoes $20 million or $30 million paycheck. 1% of 500 million is a pretty good deal. Well, again, the streaming services, which I'm going to start talking about in a moment, have sort of taken over the distribution aspect of film. They would not do that. They would not do that. It's just, here's one payment. You don't get paid anymore. Well, actors and directors and other people were upset. Like, if I make a successful show that goes on to make billions and billions of dollars, why am I getting paid the same as if I made something that just kind of sank into nothingness? So the streaming services have instituted a bonus if a show reaches a certain benchmark, if it's in the top 20% or the top 10% in popularity on their platform, there will be some type of bonus. So that issue as to how people should get paid for later airings of a show or a movie, that was one of the things that was behind the strikes. Actors and directors and behind the scene personnel also got higher wages overall, and there were limitations on the use of artificial intelligence. I think some studio had even floated the idea that, for an actor, we could pay you for 1 day worth of work and then scan you and then use your image in perpetuity, maybe as a background extra. But we paid you for that 1 day. That doesn't seem fair. So there are limitations on the use of AI. However, the reason that I am talking about the strike is that the delay in production altered the release schedule for movies through the spring, the semester we're in right now, and also went to the summer as well. I think the next Ghostbusters movie was delayed. So a lot of the big movies that we were thinking were going to come out have been pushed to 2025. I mentioned vertical integration in the last video lecture. When a studio, makes the movie and then also owns the distribution mechanism, like owning the theater, that is considered vertical integration. And with the old Hollywood studio system, the Supreme Court said that that was an unfair business practice and was no longer acceptable. I don't understand why the model is now acceptable. Okay. Maybe we're going to see another lawsuit in the future, but vertical integration is back again, right? Everything old is new again. Vertical integration is back again because you have these big entertainment and tech companies producing the content and also owning their own streaming services. To me, this is just a new model of what existed in the past. Whereas previously, movie studios owned theaters, now they own their own streaming services. And there's something called churn, which is a big problem with the streaming industry right now. People signing up, maybe getting a free trial. This isn't even to account for people borrowing other people's passwords. I've heard that this goes on. People watch on other people's services. Um, but this chart right here shows stars. Churn is new people signing up and people leaving. If almost 10% of your user base is changing every month, that's pretty significant. So, because we have so many people competing with one another, and because we have such a problem with churn, I think, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, many people think this, we are going to see some consolidation. And my prediction right now, it's January 2024. My prediction for 2024 and 2025 is consolidation. Okay, now I need to talk about distribution and how the streaming services affect distribution. This is a chart, goes back to 2014, but it works for the sake of references. Movies used to come out and stay in a movie theater for 2 or 3 months. Then they would go to maybe some type of premium video service, or maybe the hotel would get pay-per-view. And then maybe it would go to something like HBO, which was considered like a premium subscription cable service. Then it would go to other cable services, and then it would work its way down to broadcast television. And then you also had VHS and then DVD, Blu-ray releases in there as well. But the idea was that there was a staggered, um, chronologically staggered schedule. We call those windows. This practice was called windowing, which you would release a film on different platforms at different times, and you would do a big marketing push for the original cinematic release. That was the big release. And but you also do marketing when it came out on Blu-ray, and then you do marketing again when it's on HBO, and then you do marketing again when it's on regular old television. This practice is going away, and it's been going away quickly for the last few years because of the internet. Serious experiments to get away from that windowing were started more than a decade ago. In 2011, a film called Tower Heist, which is actually not a bad film. It's a pretty decent film. The idea was that this would be available on some type of home streaming service, whatever home streaming service existed in 2011. I'm not even sure what we were talking about in 2011, for something like $30 or $40. And if you have a family with a group of people, that's comparable to buying tickets for everyone to go to the cinema. So it would be in the cinema and it would be available at home on the same time. The organization of people that owned movie theaters actually blocked this. They said, no, we're not going to do this. We make so much money selling concessions. That's not a joke. That's true. Movie theaters do make the bulk of their money through the overpriced popcorn and the $10 soda or whatever it is. And if people could watch Tower Heist at home, they're not going to be spending $20 for the popcorn and soda. So that experiment was actually blocked. This was a very, very early experiment in VOD. VOD stands for video on demand. An early experiment in VOD was blocked because the movie theater owners wanted to preserve the old business model. Eventually, the push towards day and date releasing became too much. Day and date is the term when a movie is released simultaneously on multiple platforms. You could watch it on Netflix the same day you could go to the theater to watch it as well. Day and date. Snowpiercer was a fairly modest budget science fiction film that did a day and date release a couple years ago. Then there was also something called The Interview. That was a very weird, I could do a whole lecture on The Interview. That was a very, very weird um, phenomenon where there was concerns about North Korean terrorism. So the film was put on streaming services for fear that people were going to blow up movie theaters. Well, over time, audiences have become, and streaming, as you all know, streaming is clearly the way of the future. So day and date is not going away. And now what we're seeing is many movie filmmakers make a deal with one of these streaming services. We have Netflix, used to be HBO Max, now it's Max. So, you're halfway through production, or maybe you just started production, you could sign the rights away. Uh, okay, where was I? The point is that many films will have an exclusive deal with one of the streaming services before the film is even completed. But there's a strange negotiation going on right now in Hollywood where some filmmakers still want the old fashioned, very prestigious cinema release and kind of an old fashioned cinema. They want it there for a month or 45 days or 60 days before it goes straight to the streaming service. But then other times, films are coming out day and date and on both services simultaneously. So I don't know what the preferred practice is going to be in the future, but all this relates to sort of the ongoing overlap between the film and television industries, which I've already mentioned, and how to distinguish between the two. Okay, back to the point I mentioned about Hollywood having this negotiation as to what is the best release strategy in the era of streaming. During COVID, during sort of peak pandemic, Warner Brothers did a deal with HBO Max, which is now Max, where everything was done as day and date. That actually upset some people because of the back end deal that I already mentioned. Some of these stars had back end deals, and they felt like the box office is decimated if you put something directly on to streaming. Disney experimented with some films getting a day and date, but then other films would go to Disney Plus, but they get what's called PVOD. SVOD is subscription video on demand. Okay, we got VOD, video on demand. We got SVOD, subscription video on demand. And we got PVOD, premium video on demand. Premium video on demand. That means, I'm already a subscriber to Netflix or Max or Apple TV, whatever, but they want me to pay $20 or $30 for this one thing because they know that it's very, very attractive content and they know people are willing to pay for it. So we got VOD, SVOD, and PVOD. All this is in the notes. Which brings me to this point. Flowers of the Killing Moon. I'm going to call it that. I'm going to call it Flowers of the Killing Moon. You know what I'm talking about. Martin Scorsese film. As of recording, it's made about 156 million, which is, maybe seemed like a lot of money. They spent at least 200 million making it. And the marketing budget for films is equal to the cost of production. So let's say Flowers of the Killing Moon, let's say, it's 400 million. That's not a lot of money to bring in. If you spent 400 million, that's not a lot of money to bring in. However, it is, here's a headline here. Is it a flop or not? Well, by the old metrics, yes, it did not make the cost of production and the cost of marketing. It would be considered a flop. However, it's going to be on Apple TV. And right now, Apple TV is marketing it and selling it as a PVOD title. They're charging extra money to watch it. A year from now, 2 years from now, if Apple was able to attract enough people to their service through this Flowers of the Killing Moon, whatever, then it's a success. I liked it. I would say I liked it. I thought it was too long. Glad I didn't see it in the cinema. But I did like it. So, but anyway, this sort of like things existing on streaming platforms as something you watch at home and in the theaters, it sort of has complicated the economics in the industry. So it's not clear what is a hit and what is not a hit. Some highlights from last year and some things from last year. We had, of course, the Barbenheimer phenomenon, the film Barbie, which I liked from last summer. I really liked it more than I thought I would. And Oppenheimer came out, two very different films came out on the same day, and people developed a social media phenomenon with memes. I love this poster right here, Barbenheimer. They both did pretty well. Both films did pretty well. And rather than cannibalize each other, they actually generated renewed interest in going to the cinema after a long period of time where people were not going to the cinema during COVID. So I think Barbenheimer is something that many studios would like to repeat the success of the Barbenheimer viral phenomenon. However, this is totally unpredictable. This was not manufactured in a marketing lab. This kind of happened organically on social media. So I think these type of viral social media fads cannot really be manufactured as easily as one would like, I'll say. Okay. Loved it. Godzilla -1. It was awesome. Right now, it's made over $81 million. And again, we got a very low budget. We got $15 million budget. Now, the special effects are spectacular. It's an awesome looking movie. If Hollywood had made this movie, the budget would have been 200 million, right? Like the Flower Moon thing, because we would have had some big name actors in it, like Chris Pratt and Jack Black or whatever, or Ryan Reynolds. Those actors make a ridiculous amount of money. So if Hollywood had made this movie, it probably would have had a huge budget. It looks like one of those huge budget Marvel movies, but they were able to do it. It's in Japanese with subtitles, which I totally loved. Is it a low budget because of exploitative working conditions, or because they didn't have any big actors, or just because they're very smart at what they did? I think we're going to see more Godzilla movies like this. I want to see more Godzilla movies like this. And are we going to see sequels to the Five Nights at Freddy's? I assume you're the demographic. That game, the Five Nights at Freddy's game. The film did very, very well. And surprisingly, it did well, even though it had a day and date release. Okay. It was on Peacock and in movie theaters the same day. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but a lot of people still went to the cinema to see it, even though they could have watched it at home on Peacock, which shows the appeal of going to the cinema, right? There's the social experience, there's a group viewing experience, there's some type of hype and hoopla you get from going to a theater with a crowd of people, that social aspect you don't get at home. So I don't see why there's a question mark here. I think we will see more Five Nights at Freddy's movies, probably multiple. But the reason it was a success was not just because of the box office, but the fact that it was day and date and people still went to the cinema. A film that didn't do as well as people thought was Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. Yeah, I snagged this online. Yeah, it made a ridiculous amount of money. It made like 600 million. But again, to go back to that point, these films can cost so much money that they were expecting even more. And then Tom Cruise famously blamed the low performance of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning on Oppenheimer. He wanted his film to be shown on IMAX theaters. That weekend, the IMAX theaters already had been promised to Christopher Nolan films, Oppenheimer. Nolan made that deal long ago. He shot the film using these specially made IMAX cameras, and in exchange for using the IMAX technology, they said, you're going to get the IMAX screens at the multiplexes. Tom Cruise reports, I don't know this for a fact, but reportedly he was even calling people who own movie theaters or people who own chains of movie theaters and personally pleading with them, please kick Oppenheimer off the big screen, give me the big screen. They did not. And I did see the Dead Reckoning, which was totally fine. I was able to see it at home. It was totally fine. But yeah, as terms of a quality film, Oppenheimer's better. I mean, there's no dispute. Oppenheimer's better. I'm going to conclude this lecture with a prediction about something that's going to be a big hit in 2024. I'm doing this video in January 2024, but Deadpool 3 is coming out over the summer. I think people are very, very excited about that. I liked the last two Deadpool movies. And if you're really into Marvel movies, this is a big deal that Wolverine's showing up, X-Men, Sony, different rights issues. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But I think people are very excited to see Wolverine and Deadpool team up. There was also supposed to be a Captain America movie in the summer of 2024, but that's been pushed back to 2025, partially because of the strike that I mentioned earlier. So the Captain America movie, whatever it's called, is going to be a big deal in 2025. Okay, bonus historical factoid for the end of the video. I'm at the corner of Gower and Melrose here in Los Angeles, California. I'm at the corner of the Paramount lot, Paramount Studios. That big globe, you can see that big globe right there, that globe, that is left over from the previous owners of the studio, RKO, Radio Keith Orpheum. Yeah. That was one of the big movie studios back in the golden age, back during the studio system. Anyway, so Paramount now has a lot, but that globe is left over. A little bit of old Hollywood trivia for you there, and maybe you can see Astro Burger behind me for those of you who know LA.